Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to another episode of the English Globe, your favorite channel for learning real-world English through powerful stories, important global topics, and thoughtful conversations. I'm Adam, and I'm so happy to have you here with us today. Whether you are listening from your phone, your computer, or even while walking outside or sitting at home, we want to thank you for choosing to spend your time learning and growing with us. Before we dive into today's interesting and serious topic, we'd like to kindly ask you for a small favor. If you enjoy our podcasts and want to support what we do, please take a moment to click the like button on this video. It helps our channel reach more learners around the world who are just like you. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The English Globe, so that you never miss any of our weekly English learning podcasts. We create long and thoughtful episodes designed to help you improve your listening skills while learning about real events and life-changing ideas.
Yes, and we'd love to know a little more about you. Please go ahead and tell us in the comments below where you are listening from. Are you tuning in from India, Egypt, Pakistan, Brazil, Germany, or maybe from a small town somewhere in the world? We have listeners from all over, and it's always so exciting to see how far our voices travel. Also, after you listen to this episode, we would love to hear your opinion about today's topic. Do you think the United States is helping the situation between Iran and Israel? Or do you believe it is making things more complicated? Your opinion matters, and your thoughts can also help other listeners understand this issue from different perspectives.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about today's episode. The title of this podcast is, What Role Does America Play in the Iran-Israel Conflict? And yes, that is a very big question. It involves not only politics, but also history, religion, economics, and military power. This is not just a local issue between two countries in the Middle East. This is a conflict that has captured the attention of the entire world, and the United States plays a very big role in it. But why? Why is America so involved? What does it want from the region? And how does its support for one country affect the other?
In this episode, we're going to explore all of that step by step. But don't worry, we know this topic can sound difficult or complex, especially for English learners. That's why we promise to keep our conversation clear, slow, and easy to understand. We're going to explain important events from the past, the relationships between these countries, and the reasons why America gets involved. Our goal is not to take sides or tell you who is right or wrong. Our goal is to help you understand the situation, learn the vocabulary, and practice listening to natural English that talks about real things happening in the world.
Now you might be wondering, why is this topic important to learn in English? Well, the truth is, many international conversations, whether in news, politics, or peace talks, happen in English. If you can understand global issues like this in English, you will not only improve your language skills, but you'll also become more informed, more thoughtful, and more confident when talking with others about world events. And the Iran-Israel conflict is a perfect example of a topic that appears often in news articles, documentaries, political speeches, and even international debates.
That's right. And here's something else we want you to know. Even if this conflict is happening far away from where you live, it still affects the whole world in many ways. Through oil prices, international trade, refugee movements, religious tensions, and even through the way countries form alliances. And the United States, being one of the most powerful nations on earth, has the ability to influence what happens between Iran and Israel, either by supporting, stopping, or changing the direction of the conflict. This is why we believe this is a topic worth discussing, and it's also a great chance to build your English skills with something real and meaningful.
In this episode, we'll start by giving you some history. How did the problems between Iran and Israel begin? What events made things worse? Then we'll explain how America got involved, what it wants from each country, and how its choices have shaped the situation over the years. We'll also talk about some recent events, like military strikes, peace efforts, and international reactions. And finally, we'll ask you to share your own opinion, because your voice matters.
So please get comfortable. Maybe make a cup of tea or coffee. Take out your notebook if you want to write down some new words or important facts. And most importantly, listen with an open mind and an open heart. We're here to guide you through the story, and we promise to make it both educational and enjoyable.
And once again, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, The English Globe. Your support helps us keep making these long and helpful episodes for English learners around the world. Also, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you are from, and after the episode, please share your thoughts. What do you think about America's role in this conflict? Is it helping, hurting, or simply protecting its own interests? We can't wait to hear from you.
All right, let's begin our journey into this important global topic. In the next section, we'll take you back in time to understand how the relationship between Iran and Israel became so tense. This is where the story truly begins. Let's go. Now that we've introduced today's topic and explained why it's important, let's go back in time and talk about how the relationship between Iran and Israel became so difficult and full of tension. Many people around the world see these two countries as enemies today, but it wasn't always like this. In fact, there was a time in history when Iran and Israel had a much more neutral or even cooperative relationship. So what happened? Why did things change? And how did this relationship become one of the most dangerous rivalries in the Middle East? Let's find out together.
Yes, Julia, that's a great question. To understand the conflict between Iran and Israel today, we must first look at what their relationship was like in the past. Let's begin with the time before the year 1979. Back then, Iran was ruled by a leader called the Shah of Iran. The word Shah means king, and his name was Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The Shah was very friendly with the West, especially with countries like the United States and, surprisingly, with Israel too. During his rule, Iran had diplomatic relations with Israel. That means the two countries had official contact. They traded goods and even shared information about technology and security. At that time, Iran was one of the few Muslim-majority countries in the Middle East that had a working relationship with Israel.
But in 1979, everything changed. A huge revolution happened in Iran, and it was called the Islamic Revolution. The people of Iran, led by a religious leader named Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, rose up against the Shah. They were angry about many things: corruption, poverty, Western influence, and the loss of Islamic values. After months of protests and violence, the Shah fled the country, and Ayatollah Khomeini became the new supreme leader of Iran. He and his followers created a new government based on Islamic law, and they called it the Islamic Republic of Iran.
And one of the first things the new Iranian government did was to cut all ties with Israel. Khomeini called Israel a Zionist regime and described it as an enemy of Islam. He also began supporting groups that were against Israel, including groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Palestine. This was the beginning of a deep hostility between the two countries. Iran started to see Israel not just as a political opponent, but as a dangerous threat to the Muslim world and especially to the Palestinian people. And Israel, of course, began to see Iran as a powerful enemy that was supporting violence against Israeli citizens.
Yes, and this hostility only grew stronger over time. In the 1980s and 1990s, Iran continued to support groups that were fighting against Israel. At the same time, Israel was building stronger relationships with other countries, especially with the United States, to protect itself. The situation became more serious in the 2000s when Iran began developing its nuclear program. Israel believed that Iran was trying to build nuclear weapons, even though Iran said its nuclear program was for peaceful purposes like energy and medicine.
Exactly. And this nuclear issue became one of the biggest points of tension. Israel felt extremely threatened by the idea of Iran having a nuclear bomb. Israeli leaders said they could not allow a country that called for the destruction of Israel to have such dangerous weapons. This fear led to more pressure, more sanctions, and even talk of war. On the other side, Iran said it had the right to use nuclear technology and accused Israel of already having nuclear weapons in secret, although Israel has never officially confirmed that.
So over the years, this rivalry turned into something much bigger than just words. Iran and Israel didn't go to war directly, but they started fighting each other in other countries. This kind of indirect fighting is called a proxy war. For example, Iran supports Hezbollah, a group in Lebanon that has fought with Israel many times. Iran also supports groups in Syria and Iraq that are against Israel. Meanwhile, Israel has carried out many secret missions and airstrikes in Syria to stop Iranian influence. These are like silent battles happening in the background.
That's right, Julia. And today, the relationship between Iran and Israel is one of the most dangerous in the Middle East. Both countries see each other as serious threats. Iran continues to speak out against Israel and supports anti-Israel groups. Israel continues to monitor Iran's military activities and uses its intelligence and military power to stop Iran from growing stronger in the region. All of this makes the Middle East a very tense and unpredictable place.
And of course, the United States is deeply involved in this situation, which is what we'll talk about in the next part of our episode. But before we move on, let's quickly review what we've learned so far. First, we learned that Iran and Israel once had a working relationship before 1979. Then, after the Islamic Revolution in Iran, everything changed. The new government viewed Israel as a dangerous enemy, and the relationship became hostile. Over time, the conflict grew deeper, with both countries accusing each other of aggression and supporting violence. And now, this rivalry affects not just the two countries, but the entire region and even the world.
We also introduced the idea of a proxy war, where two countries don't fight directly, but support other groups to do the fighting for them. And we talked about the nuclear issue, which is one of the most serious concerns for both sides. If this all sounds complex, don't worry. We'll continue to break things down clearly in the next parts of the episode. Our goal is to help you understand the situation step by step, and also improve your listening and vocabulary in the process.
And remember, dear listeners, you can always pause the episode, take notes, and listen again if something feels confusing. That's the beauty of podcasts. You can learn at your own pace. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, did you already know about the 1979 Islamic Revolution? Have you ever heard about the idea of a proxy war before? We'd love to know what you think.
All right, in the next section, we're going to explore the history between the United States and Israel. How did that relationship begin? And why is America considered Israel's strongest ally? We'll talk about military support, shared values, and the long friendship between the two countries. This part will help us better understand America's position in the conflict.
So stay with us, keep your mind open, and let's keep learning together here on the English Globe. We'll be back in just a moment.
Let's now explore one of the most important parts of today's topic, the relationship between the United States and Israel. When we talk about the Iran-Israel conflict, we cannot forget that the United States is closely connected to both of these countries, especially Israel. Many people around the world already know that America is considered Israel's most powerful and loyal ally. But where did this relationship come from? How did it grow so strong over time? And why does the United States continue to support Israel so strongly, even when there is conflict and controversy? Let's go step by step and understand the full story together.
Yes, Adam, this is such an important part of the conversation. The story of US-Israel relations goes back more than 75 years. After World War II ended in 1945, the Jewish people around the world faced a deep crisis. Millions of Jews had been killed during the Holocaust by Nazi Germany. Many survivors had no home, no protection, and no country to call their own. In 1948, the modern state of Israel was created in a part of the Middle East that had deep historical and religious meaning for the Jewish people. This new country was meant to be a safe place for Jews, but its creation also caused major conflict with the Arab world, especially the Palestinians who lived in the region.
Right? And when Israel was officially declared a country in May 1948, the United States was the first country in the world to recognize it. That act showed early support. Over the years, this relationship became stronger and deeper. The U.S. saw Israel not just as a new country, but as a fellow democracy in the Middle East, a region where most countries were ruled by kings, dictators, or military leaders. The fact that Israel had elections, a legal system, freedom of speech, and a strong connection to the Jewish community in America helped build a foundation of friendship between the two nations.
Exactly. And during the Cold War, which was a long period of tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, America also saw Israel as a strategic partner. Most of the Arab countries were supported by the Soviet Union at that time, while Israel supported the West. So helping Israel was also part of America's strategy to protect its interests in the Middle East. Over the years, this support turned into real military, financial, and political aid. For example, the US began giving billions of dollars in military assistance to Israel, money used for defense systems, weapons, technology, and more.
And even today, the United States gives Israel about $3.8 billion every year in military aid. This is one of the largest aid packages given to any country in the world. The two countries also work closely together on military operations, intelligence sharing, and defense technology. For example, one of the most famous joint projects between the U.S. and Israel is the Iron Dome system. This is a defense technology that helps shoot down rockets before they can land and cause damage. It has saved many lives in Israel and is often seen as a symbol of the close military relationship between the two countries.
That's right, Adam. And the relationship isn't just about weapons and defense. There are also deep cultural and religious connections between the two countries. America has a large Jewish population, and many Christian Americans also strongly support Israel for religious reasons. For example, some Christians believe that supporting Israel is part of their faith because of the biblical history of the region. This religious connection adds another layer of support from US citizens, which makes politicians in Washington very careful when it comes to Israel. In fact, many American presidents and members of Congress proudly say that they support Israel and consider it a close friend of the United States.
But of course, Julia, not everyone in America agrees on this. Over the past few decades, especially in recent years, some people in the U.S. have started to question this relationship. They ask, why does the U.S. give so much money to Israel every year? Shouldn't that money be spent at home on education or healthcare? Others say that by supporting Israel so strongly, the U.S. may appear biased in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They believe America should also support Palestinian rights and take a more neutral role in the region.
Yes, those are very real concerns. But the general position of the US government has remained consistent for many years. The official policy is that Israel has the right to exist and the right to defend itself from attacks. At the same time, the US has often said it supports a two-state solution. That means a peaceful solution where both Israel and the Palestinians can have their own countries and live side by side. But in reality, finding that peace has been very difficult.
And now, when we connect this back to Iran, the picture becomes even more complex. You see, Iran is one of the main countries that strongly opposes the U.S.-Israel relationship. Iranian leaders often say that the U.S. is helping Israel to hurt Palestinians and increase tension in the Middle East. They also believe that America's presence in the region is creating more problems rather than solving them. On the other side, U.S. leaders often say that Iran is a threat to peace and stability because it supports terrorism, works with dangerous groups like Hezbollah, and continues to make threats against Israel.
So, in simple words, the US and Israel are close friends with shared military and political goals. and Iran sees both of them as enemies. That's why this triangle, US, Israel, and Iran, is at the center of so many serious problems in the region. It's not just about one country fighting another. It's about deep relationships, long history, political power, religious belief, and international strategy, all mixed together. And that's what makes the situation so complicated and difficult to solve.
And now we hope that our listeners understand why the United States is seen as such a strong ally of Israel. From military support to shared democratic values, from Cold War politics to modern defense systems, the connection runs very deep. And that connection plays a big role in how America reacts to any conflict involving Israel, especially one with Iran.
Yes, and in the next section of our episode, we'll focus more on the relationship between the United States and Iran. We'll talk about how they used to be allies many decades ago, what happened after the Islamic Revolution, and why today they are often seen as enemies. That history is just as important as what we've talked about today, and it will help you understand the full picture.
But before we move on, let's ask our listeners a few questions. Did you know that America gives billions of dollars to Israel every year? What do you think about the U.S.-Israel relationship? Should the U.S. continue to give so much support, or should it play a more neutral role in Middle Eastern politics?
Let us know in the comments. Your opinion matters, and we love reading what you think. And remember, even if you don't fully understand everything yet, that's okay. These are complex topics, and the more you listen, the more you'll learn. That's what we're here for, to help you grow your English and your knowledge of the world at the same time.
Stay with us as we move forward in this podcast. In the next part, we'll dive into the story of America and Iran, from friendship to deep hostility, and how that history affects today's conflicts. You're listening to The English Globe.
Let's continue learning together. See you in the next section.
In the previous part of our episode, we explored the deep and long-standing relationship between the United States and Israel, from the early days of Israel's creation to the modern military and political partnerships that shape global affairs. But to truly understand the full picture of the Iran-Israel conflict and America's role in it, we now need to look at the history between the United States and Iran, a story that started with friendship and ended in deep mistrust and hostility. So, let's take a deep breath and slowly walk through this fascinating journey together.
Yes, Adam. This is one of the most important chapters in modern Middle Eastern history, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. Many people today see Iran and the United States as enemies, but that wasn't always the case. In fact, for many decades, Iran and the US were very close allies. If we go back to the early 20th century, the relationship between the two countries was generally positive. Iran was not a democracy, but it had a monarchy led by a king called the Shah of Iran, and the US supported him, especially after World War II. The United States saw Iran as an important partner in the Middle East because of its oil resources and its location between the Soviet Union and the Persian Gulf.
That's right. But everything changed in the year 1953. That year, a major event happened that is still remembered in Iran with anger and suspicion. Iran had a prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh, who was democratically elected and very popular among Iranians. He wanted to take control of Iran's oil industry, which had been controlled for many years by a British company. Mossadegh said that Iran's oil belonged to the Iranian people and should be used to improve their lives. But this idea made Britain and the United States very worried. They feared that Iran was becoming too independent and that it might even move closer to the Soviet Union.
So, with the help of British intelligence, the United States secretly organized a coup d'etat to remove Mossadegh from power. This operation was called Operation Ajax, and it led to the return of the Shah as the absolute ruler of Iran. The US helped the Shah become stronger, and for the next 25 years, Iran was ruled by a pro-American monarchy. On the surface, things looked good. There was economic growth, new schools and hospitals, and stronger ties with the West. But many Iranians were not happy. They felt that the Shah was becoming too close to the West, too rich, and too disconnected from the poor and religious people of the country. His secret police, called Savak, were known for arresting and torturing political opponents, and many people felt there was no freedom.
This growing anger finally exploded in 1979 during what is now known as the Islamic Revolution. Led by a religious leader named Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, millions of people came to the streets to protest against the Shah. They wanted a new kind of government, one based on Islamic law and values, not Western influence. The Shah fled the country, and Khomeini returned from exile to become the supreme leader of the new Islamic Republic of Iran. For the first time, Iran became a theocracy, a country ruled by religious leaders, and it cut ties with the United States.
That same year, one of the most dramatic events in US-Iran relations took place. Iranian students stormed the American embassy in Tehran and took 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage. The world watched in shock as the crisis continued for 444 days. The US tried different ways to solve the situation, including a failed military rescue mission. Eventually, the hostages were released, but the damage to the relationship between the two countries was done. From that point on, the US saw Iran as a dangerous enemy, and Iran saw America as a symbol of imperialism, corruption, and oppression.
And from that moment until today, the relationship between the US and Iran has been filled with tension, threats, sanctions, and even military conflict. Over the years, the US has accused Iran of supporting terrorism, especially through groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. Iran, on the other hand, says it is defending oppressed people and fighting against what it sees as American and Israeli aggression. The two sides have not had formal diplomatic relations since 1980. Instead, they speak to each other through public speeches, media channels, and sometimes through other countries as mediators.
And then, there's the issue of Iran's nuclear program. This is one of the most serious and sensitive topics in the US-Iran conflict. For many years, Iran has been developing nuclear technology, saying that it is only for peaceful purposes like energy and medicine. But the US, Israel, and many other countries believe that Iran is secretly working to build nuclear weapons. This fear led to a series of international negotiations, and in 2015, a major agreement was reached called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or simply the Iran nuclear deal. In this deal, Iran agreed to limit its nuclear activities in exchange for relief from economic sanctions.
But in 2018, the situation changed again. President Donald Trump decided to withdraw the US from the Iran nuclear deal, saying it was a bad deal and that Iran could not be trusted. After that, the US reimposed harsh sanctions on Iran, targeting its economy, banking system, and oil exports. Iran responded by reducing its commitments under the deal and increasing its nuclear activities again. The tension grew even more in 2020 when a top Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, was killed in a US drone strike in Iraq. Iran responded with missile attacks on US military bases. Although both sides avoided full war, the relationship became even more dangerous.
So, as you can see, the history between the United States and Iran is full of ups and downs, but mostly downs in the past 4 decades. From allies to enemies, from partners to threats, the story is one of broken trust, conflicting interests, and deep resentment. And all of this plays a direct role in the larger conflict between Iran and Israel, because the US is often seen as standing firmly on Israel's side while viewing Iran as a threat to peace and stability in the region.
Yes, and that's why whenever there is violence between Iran and Israel, the US is almost always involved, whether it's through statements, sanctions, military movements, or peace negotiations. The history we've just talked about helps explain why the US acts the way it does and why Iran reacts so strongly. It's not just about today. It's about what happened yesterday and even many years ago.
We hope this long explanation helped you better understand the complex and emotional history between Iran and the United States. Now we'd love to ask you, our dear listeners, did you know about the 1953 coup in Iran? Do you think the US should have stayed in the Iran nuclear deal? What do you think is the best way to build peace between these two countries?
Let us know your answers in the comments. We read everything, and we truly value your opinions. Remember, these discussions are not only a great way to learn English, but also a powerful way to understand how the world works. Because learning a language should always include learning about people, history, and global issues.
In the next section of our podcast, we'll look more closely at how Iran and Israel see each other and how their rivalry continues to affect the entire Middle East. We'll also talk about the military and political strategies they use and how America fits into all of this.
You're listening to the English Globe. Stay with us as we go even deeper into this important and fascinating topic. Thank you so much for staying with us, dear listeners. We are now at a very important point in this podcast. So far, we've talked about how the United States became deeply involved with both Israel and Iran in very different ways, and how these relationships have shaped international politics for decades. But now, in this part of the episode, we want to focus on the core of the conflict between Iran and Israel. What makes these two countries see each other as enemies? What are the roots of their rivalry? And how do religion, politics, and power play a role in keeping this conflict alive? Let's dive into this in a simple and clear way so that even beginner English learners can understand.
Yes, Adam. First, let's look at the religious aspect, which is often the starting point when people try to understand why Iran and Israel have such strong hostility toward one another. Iran is a Shiite Muslim country with a government led by Islamic clerics, known as the Supreme Leader and other religious figures. On the other hand, Israel is a Jewish state, created in 1948 as a homeland for the Jewish people. Now, many people assume that because these countries follow different religions, they are automatically enemies. But that's not completely true. It's not just about religion. It's more about how religion is used in politics and how it connects to national identity and ideology.
Exactly. In Iran, the government sees itself as the protector of oppressed people in the Muslim world. This belief is part of what they call the Islamic Revolution ideology. According to this belief, Iran should stand up against what it sees as injustice, especially injustice caused by powerful Western countries, or what they call Zionist oppression, a term often used by Iranian leaders when they speak about Israel. Iran's leaders say that the State of Israel has harmed the rights of Palestinians and other Muslim communities, so they believe it's their religious and moral duty to oppose Israel's actions in the region. This belief is not just a religious idea, it has become a central part of Iranian foreign policy.
And in Israel, there's also a strong national and religious identity. Israel was created after World War II as a safe place for Jews, many of whom had suffered terrible persecution in Europe, especially during the Holocaust. For Israelis, their country is not just a piece of land. It's the only place where they can truly feel safe and secure as a Jewish people. Because of this, they are very protective of their borders and very sensitive to any threats, especially from countries like Iran, which openly say they want to remove the State of Israel from the map. This kind of language creates deep fear and suspicion in Israel, and it leads to aggressive responses.
Now let's talk about politics and power, which are just as important as religion in this conflict. Iran wants to be a major power in the Middle East. It wants to influence what happens in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and the Persian Gulf. To do that, Iran has built strong relationships with groups in different countries, groups that are often seen as enemies by Israel and the United States. For example, Iran supports Hezbollah, a powerful group in Lebanon, and Hamas, which operates in Gaza. Both of these groups have had armed conflict with Israel, and Iran gives them money, weapons, and training. Iran says it does this to support resistance against occupation. Israel says Iran is simply using these groups to attack Israel without fighting directly.
This kind of proxy war, which means fighting through other groups instead of directly, has become one of the main ways that Iran and Israel challenge each other. It's not just about soldiers and armies anymore. It's about networks, alliances, and influence. And the US plays a big role here too. Because the United States sees Hezbollah and Hamas as terrorist organizations, it supports Israel in trying to weaken or stop these groups. The US gives Israel intelligence, weapons, and political support. So even though Iran and Israel do not have an open war, their fight continues through these smaller battles, and America is deeply involved in supporting one side.
Let's also talk about Syria, which has become one of the main battlegrounds for this conflict. During the Syrian civil war, Iran sent troops and weapons to support the Syrian government, which is also close to Iran. At the same time, Israel carried out airstrikes inside Syria to destroy Iranian weapons and military bases. These airstrikes continue even today. This means that while Iran is trying to expand its power in Syria, Israel is working to block that expansion. And the US often supports Israel's actions by sharing information and pressuring the United Nations not to interfere.
One more important issue is nuclear weapons. Iran says it doesn't want to build nuclear weapons, but many countries, including Israel and the United States, do not believe this. They worry that if Iran gets nuclear weapons, it will use them to threaten Israel or give them to other groups. That's why Israel has even considered military action to stop Iran's nuclear program. Iran, in return, says that Israel already has nuclear weapons but does not admit it publicly. So both sides see the other as dangerous, and this fear pushes them to take aggressive actions. Again, America is right in the middle of this, often working to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power while continuing to support Israel's security.
So, when we talk about the Iran-Israel conflict, we're really talking about a complex struggle that includes religion, power, military strategy, and deep historical wounds. And because America is Israel's closest ally, and because America has had such a difficult relationship with Iran, it often becomes the third player in a two-player game. The US gives Israel support, but it also tries to pressure Iran through sanctions and diplomacy. This keeps the tension high and the situation unpredictable.
And that's why this conflict continues. It's not just about one issue. It's not just about land or religion or history. It's about all of these things mixed together. It's about identity, fear, power, pride, and pain. That's what makes it so difficult to solve and so important for the world to understand. And that's why we, here at the English Globe, want to help you learn not just English, but also the stories and realities behind today's most important global events.
Before we move on to the next part, let's ask our amazing listeners a few questions again. Do you think religion should play a role in politics? Do you think Iran and Israel will ever be able to talk peacefully? What role should America play? Should it support one side or try to bring peace between both sides?
Share your answers in the comments. Reading your thoughts helps us make better episodes, and your opinion matters. And of course, if you're learning new words and ideas from this podcast, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel, The English Globe. It helps us grow and helps more learners around the world find this content.
In our next part, we're going to explore how America's military presence and political influence in the Middle East continue to affect the balance between Iran and Israel, and why this conflict is not just about three countries, but about the future of an entire region. All right, dear listeners, thank you again for staying with us for this deep and meaningful conversation. In this next part of our podcast, we are going to talk about something that is often overlooked when people discuss the Iran-Israel conflict. We are going to talk about why the United States is so deeply involved in the Middle East in the first place. Because if we really want to understand America's role between Iran and Israel, we need to ask an important question. What are America's strategic interests in the region? Why does it care so much? Why does it spend billions of dollars, keep military bases, and get involved in so many political and military actions in the Middle East? Let's try to answer these big questions step by step.
Yes, Adam. And this is a part of the conversation that really helps us understand the bigger picture. Let's begin with oil. For many decades, the Middle East has been one of the most important sources of oil in the world. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, and others have huge oil reserves that supply energy to many parts of the world, including the United States and its allies. In the 20th century, especially after World War II, oil became a key reason why America got so involved in this region. The US wanted to make sure that oil flowed smoothly, without interruptions, and that no single country could control all the oil and use it as a weapon.
That's absolutely right. In fact, during the 1973 oil crisis, many Americans were shocked when they suddenly faced high fuel prices and even shortages at gas stations because of a decision made by oil-producing countries in the Middle East. That event showed how powerful and important oil really was, and it convinced U.S. leaders that they needed to have a strong presence in the region. They believed that by building strong relationships with certain Middle Eastern countries, they could protect their energy supply and prevent any one country, like Iran, for example, from becoming too powerful.
Now let's move on to military bases, which are another big reason the United States is involved in the region. Over the years, America has built dozens of military bases across the Middle East. You can find US troops in places like Qatar, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Kuwait, and other countries. These bases allow the United States to respond quickly to any conflict or threat in the region. They also help the US keep an eye on Iran, and they act as a form of protection for allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia. For example, if a war breaks out or if there is a terrorist attack, American forces can act fast from nearby bases instead of flying all the way from the US.
That's a good point. And let's not forget the weapons sales and defense partnerships. America is not just building bases. It is also selling weapons and military technology to many Middle Eastern countries. Israel is the biggest example. The United States gives Israel about $3.8 billion in military aid every year. This includes advanced weapons, fighter jets, and missile defense systems. But America also sells weapons to countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. This helps create a network of allies that can work together to counter threats, especially from Iran, which the US sees as a rival.
Now, some of our listeners might wonder, why does America see Iran as a threat? The answer goes back to what we discussed in earlier parts of this podcast. The relationship between the US and Iran has been hostile since 1979, when the Islamic Revolution happened in Iran and the American embassy in Tehran was attacked. Since then, there has been a lot of distrust, and the US government believes that Iran supports terrorist groups, wants to build nuclear weapons, and tries to destabilize the region by interfering in the politics of other countries. Because of these concerns, America has taken steps to isolate Iran by imposing sanctions, forming alliances, and keeping troops nearby.
And all of this connects back to Israel. America's support for Israel is not only emotional or historical, it is also strategic. Israel is seen as a stable democratic country in a region where many governments are unstable or authoritarian. It is a place where the US can count on cooperation. The two countries share intelligence, military strategies, and even technology. Some American politicians also have strong support from groups in the US that believe protecting Israel is part of their religious or moral values. So for many reasons, political, military, economic, and emotional, the US continues to stand firmly with Israel.
But here's where it gets complicated. Many countries in the Middle East, especially Iran and its allies, see this close US-Israel relationship as unfair. They believe America is not an honest peacemaker, but instead takes sides. This makes it harder for the US to act as a neutral negotiator in conflicts. When America tries to help bring peace between Israel and its neighbors, Iran and others often reject those efforts, saying the US is biased. This leads to even more tension and sometimes new waves of violence, especially when the US moves its embassy, approves military actions, or makes strong political statements.
So, what does all of this mean for the Iran-Israel conflict? It means that the United States is not just watching from the outside, it is a key player. Its actions, alliances, and decisions can either cool down or heat up the situation. When the US makes a peace deal with Iran, like the Iran nuclear deal in 2015, the temperature drops a little. But when the US pulls out of the deal, like it did in 2018 under President Trump, the temperature rises again. Each move has consequences. It affects how Iran behaves, how Israel responds, and how the whole region feels.
And this brings us to one more important point: the American public and politics. Not everyone in the US agrees with the same foreign policy. Some politicians believe in strong military support for Israel no matter what. Others think America should focus more on peace-building and diplomacy with Iran. Some citizens believe the US should reduce its role in the Middle East entirely, saying that too much involvement has brought war, not peace. This means that American foreign policy can change depending on who is president and which party is in power. That's why this situation is always changing. It depends not just on what Iran or Israel does, but also on what America decides.
So, dear listeners, now you can see why America's role in the Iran-Israel conflict is so big and complex. It's not just about choosing sides. It's about oil, security, military bases, allies, influence, history, and power. And every decision that America makes affects millions of lives across the Middle East and even around the world.
Let's ask you some reflection questions. Do you think America should continue to have military bases in the Middle East? Is it possible for the US to have a balanced relationship with both Iran and Israel? If you were in charge of American foreign policy, what would you do differently?
Please write your answers in the comments. We love reading your thoughts. And if this podcast helps you learn English and understand global topics better, please like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The English Globe. Your support means the world to us, and it keeps us going.
In the next part of this podcast, we will explore something very emotional and very real: the impact of this conflict on everyday people, ordinary Iranians, Israelis, and Palestinians. We'll talk about how regular families, children, and workers are affected by the politics and wars they didn't choose. Thank you for staying with us, dear listeners. In this section of the podcast, we're going to move away from the high-level politics, the military strategies, and the government decisions, and instead we're going to talk about something that is often ignored, but is the most important part of all of this, and that is the human cost of the Iran-Israel conflict and the wider tensions in the Middle East. Because while leaders argue, countries fight, and alliances shift, the real impact is felt by ordinary people: mothers, fathers, children, students, and workers, who are just trying to live their lives in peace.
Yes, Julia, that's a powerful point. Behind every headline, every news story, and every military action, there are people who suffer in ways we often don't see. In Iran, for example, economic sanctions placed by the United States and other countries have led to high inflation, food shortages, and unemployment. These sanctions are meant to pressure the Iranian government, but in reality, they often hurt the regular people more than the politicians. Prices go up, medicines become hard to find, and young people lose hope for the future. Many Iranians, especially the youth, are well educated, and want to connect with the world, but they feel trapped by politics they didn't choose.
And in Israel, the story is different, but also filled with challenges. Many Israelis live under constant threats of missile attacks or violence from groups that are supported by Iran, such as Hezbollah or Islamic Jihad. People in areas near the borders, especially in the north near Lebanon or in the south near Gaza, sometimes have only a few seconds to run to bomb shelters when sirens go off. Children grow up with the sound of rockets and fear of war, and parents worry every day about their family's safety. Even when things are peaceful for a while, there is always this background fear that things could explode again at any moment.
And let's not forget about the Palestinians, many of whom are caught in the middle of all of this. While the Israel-Palestine conflict is its own deep and painful issue, it is very closely connected to the Iran-Israel situation, because Iran gives political and military support to groups like Hamas in Gaza. This makes life even harder for Palestinians, who are already living under very difficult conditions. Many live in overcrowded areas with limited access to clean water, electricity, or education. When violence breaks out between Israel and Hamas, it is often Palestinian civilians, including children, who suffer the most from the airstrikes and blockades.
And dear listeners, let's also remember the people in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq, places where Iran and the US have played major roles, either directly or indirectly. In Lebanon, Iran-backed Hezbollah is very powerful, and while some people support them, many others blame them for political instability and economic crisis. In Syria, Iran supported the Assad regime during the civil war, while the US supported some opposition groups. This led to a brutal long war that killed hundreds of thousands and displaced millions. In Yemen, Iran supports the Houthi rebels, while US allies like Saudi Arabia lead a military coalition against them, causing one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world.
It's heartbreaking when we stop and think about it. So many lives have been lost, so many children have grown up in fear, and so many dreams have been destroyed, not because of anything these people did wrong, but because of the decisions made by powerful governments and leaders. Whether it's an Iranian student who can't get a visa to study abroad, an Israeli child growing up near a conflict zone, a Palestinian family living under blockade, or a Syrian refugee who lost everything, the pain is real, and it's something we must never forget when we talk about politics and power.
That's why in our podcast, we always try to look beyond just governments and ask, what is happening to the people? Because no matter where someone is from, whether Iran, Israel, Palestine, America, or anywhere else, we all want the same basic things: safety, education, opportunity, family, and peace. Most people are not interested in war or politics. They just want a normal life. And yet, year after year, decade after decade, they are the ones paying the highest price for decisions made far away from them.
One thing that makes this situation even harder is the lack of dialogue between regular people from these countries. Because of politics and media narratives, many Iranians have never met an Israeli, and vice versa. They grow up hearing that the other side is the enemy. But in reality, when people from these countries do have a chance to talk, through social media, online forums, or international events, they often find that they have much more in common than they expected. They both love their culture, they both care about their families, and they both dream of peace.
And that's why education and communication are so important. If we can encourage more people to learn about each other, to speak honestly, and to share stories not just from politicians but from real people, then maybe we can build more understanding and reduce the hate and fear that fuel these conflicts. That's also why learning English and listening to global podcasts like this one is so powerful. It connects people from all over the world and helps us understand different points of view.
Yes, and this is where we want to turn to you, dear listener. We know that many of you are listening to this podcast from different parts of the world. Maybe you are from the Middle East yourself, or maybe you're learning about this conflict for the first time. But we want to ask you, How do you think ordinary people can help bring peace, even when governments don't agree? Have you ever experienced the effects of conflict or war in your country or your family? Do you believe there is hope for peace between Iran and Israel in the future? Why or why not?
Please take a moment to share your answers in the comments below. We read every comment and we truly appreciate your voice. You can also tell us where you're listening from. We love knowing how many different countries are connected through this podcast. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The English Globe, and give this video a like. Your support helps us create more thoughtful, meaningful, and educational episodes for English learners around the world.
Coming up next, we'll explore how the United Nations and other international organizations are involved in this conflict, and whether they have the power to make a real difference. Can the world step in and stop the violence, or is it just too complicated? Stay with us, because the next part will help us answer these questions. Welcome back, dear listeners. We truly appreciate you staying with us for this deep conversation. In this section, we're going to explore something that many people ask about when they hear stories of war and conflict, and that question is, what about the United Nations? What about international diplomacy? Isn't there a global system to stop all this violence and bring peace? These are very important questions, and today we will look at the role of the United Nations, international diplomacy, and global powers in the Iran-Israel conflict, and whether they are helping, failing, or simply staying silent.
Yes, Adam, that's something many people don't fully understand. The United Nations, often called the UN, is an international organization made up of almost every country in the world. Its job is to promote peace, protect human rights, and help solve global problems. It was created after World War II with the hope that something like that would never happen again. And while the UN has played an important role in many peacekeeping missions and humanitarian efforts, when it comes to the Iran-Israel conflict or Middle East tensions, things become much more complicated. The reason is simple, but powerful: politics.
Exactly, Julia. Let's start with the UN Security Council, which is the part of the UN that deals with international peace and security. This council has 5 permanent members: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China. These 5 countries have what's called veto power, which means they can block any resolution they disagree with, even if all the other members agree. And because the United States is a close ally of Israel, it has often used its veto to block resolutions that criticize or take action against Israeli policies, especially regarding Palestine or military operations in the region. This makes it very hard for the UN to take strong, unified action on this issue.
And on the other side, you have countries like Russia and China who often support Iran's position or oppose what they see as US interference in the region. So when Iran is criticized in the UN, these countries may step in and defend Iran, or at least prevent strong resolutions from passing. What this means is that the big powers are often playing political games at the United Nations, and because of this, the UN sometimes looks powerless to stop the conflict or even speak openly about it.
That's right. But that doesn't mean the United Nations does nothing. The United Nations has several agencies that are involved in the Middle East, such as UNICEF, which helps children affected by war, or UNRWA, which supports Palestinian refugees. There are also UN peacekeepers in Lebanon, especially in the southern part near the Israeli border, where there is often tension between Israel and the Iranian-backed Hezbollah group. These peacekeepers try to monitor the situation and prevent violence, but they do not have the power to stop major attacks. They are there to observe and report, and sometimes provide a small level of stability.
Another way the United Nations is involved is through diplomatic talks and negotiations. Over the years, the UN has hosted or supported many peace conferences, summits, and meetings that tried to bring Israeli and Arab leaders together. Some of these have worked better than others. For example, the UN helped in supporting the Iran nuclear deal, officially called the JCPOA, or Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, in 2015. That agreement involved Iran, the US, the UK, France, Russia, China, Germany, and the European Union. It was designed to limit Iran's nuclear program in exchange for lifting economic sanctions. The UN Security Council approved it, and for a while it seemed like progress.
But then, in 2018, the United States pulled out of the deal under President Donald Trump, saying it wasn't strong enough. This decision made Iran angry, and they began to break the limits on their nuclear program. Other countries tried to keep the deal alive, but without the US, it became weaker. The UN couldn't stop this breakdown, and the conflict between the US and Iran got worse again. So once again, we see that international agreements and diplomacy can work, but they are very fragile and depend heavily on political will and cooperation.
Besides the UN, we also have other global players trying to influence the Iran-Israel situation. The European Union often takes a more balanced approach and has tried to mediate between Iran and the West. Countries like Germany, France, and the UK have worked hard to keep peace talks going. Even neutral countries like Switzerland or Oman have acted as messengers or quiet diplomats between Iran, Israel, and the US. Sometimes diplomacy happens in the spotlight, but many times it happens in secret meetings behind closed doors. These efforts are important, even if we don't always hear about them.
And let's not forget about regional diplomacy. In recent years, we have seen some surprising changes in the Middle East. For example, in 2020, several Arab countries, including the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, signed peace agreements with Israel under the Abraham Accords. These were supported by the United States and marked a big shift in regional politics. Iran was not happy about this because it saw these deals as a threat to its influence. At the same time, Iran and Saudi Arabia, two big rivals, recently reopened diplomatic relations in a deal brokered by China. So while tensions are high, we also see some diplomatic progress happening at the same time.
That's the thing about diplomacy. It's slow, it's fragile, and it's full of challenges, but it is often the only path to peace. Military action may bring quick results, but it also brings suffering and instability. Diplomacy, even if it takes years, can create long-term solutions. And this is where the international community, including organizations like the UN, global powers like the US, and regional players like Saudi Arabia and Turkey, must work together not to win, but to find common ground and reduce the risk of a larger war.
So the question we want to ask you now, dear listener, is this. Do you believe the United Nations is doing enough to help in the Iran-Israel conflict? Should the world powers step in more strongly, or should they stay out of the region's problems? What do you think is the role of diplomacy in today's world? Can talking really stop wars, or is it just a dream?
Please take a moment to share your answers in the comments. We are always amazed by your ideas and your passion. And if you are learning English with us, remember that writing a comment is a great way to practice expressing your thoughts in English. Even just a few sentences will help you improve. Also, if you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The English Globe. We put our hearts into every episode to help you learn English through real and meaningful topics.
In our final section coming up next, we'll bring everything together and look at the possible future scenarios. What might happen in the next few years? Will the conflict grow worse, or is there a chance for peace? And what can we, as global citizens, do to stay informed, promote peace, and help each other in these difficult times? Don't miss it. It's going to be a powerful conclusion. All right, dear listeners, we've now arrived at the final part of our journey in this deep and complex topic. First of all, we want to thank each and every one of you who has stayed with us through this episode. We know that understanding global politics, especially something as sensitive and complicated as the Iran-Israel conflict and America's involvement in it, can be difficult, but it is also so important. In this last section, we want to talk about something that everyone wonders. What's next? Is peace even possible? Or are we headed for something worse, like a bigger war?
Yes, that's the question on many minds, Adam. After all the history, after all the tensions, and with so many powerful countries involved, people feel confused and sometimes even hopeless. But the truth is, the future is not written yet. It depends on what leaders do, what ordinary people demand, and how the world responds. Let's begin by looking at the possible scenarios, different paths that the Iran-Israel relationship could take, depending on political choices, military actions, and international diplomacy. Some of these paths are dangerous, others offer hope.
Let's start with the worst-case scenario, which is unfortunately very real: a full-scale regional war. If tensions keep rising and a major incident, like a military strike or a terrorist attack, triggers retaliation, we could see Iran and Israel enter into direct war. This would likely pull in other groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and even state actors like Syria or Iraq. The United States, as Israel's strong ally, could be drawn in again with its military power. Other countries might take sides too. Russia supporting Iran, the Gulf states supporting Israel, or even Turkey getting involved. This could turn the Middle East into a battlefield and cause unimaginable suffering for millions of people. It could also disrupt oil supplies, crash global markets, and increase refugee crises across Europe and Asia.
Yes, that is a frightening picture, and sadly not just fiction. But there's also a middle ground scenario where the conflict stays at a low level. In this future, Iran and Israel continue to clash through proxy wars, small attacks, cyber warfare, and political battles, but without a full war. The US might continue to support Israel diplomatically and militarily, while Iran keeps expanding its influence through its allies. The United Nations and other global powers try to manage the crisis, but nothing changes fundamentally. Life goes on, but fear and instability remain.
And then, Julia, there is the hopeful scenario, a vision of peace. It may sound like a dream, but history shows us that even the most bitter enemies can find common ground. Who would have thought that the United States and Vietnam would be partners one day after a brutal war? Who could imagine South Africa moving from apartheid to democracy peacefully? Peace between Iran and Israel would take years, maybe decades, and would require huge changes in thinking, leadership, and public opinion. But it is possible, if people are brave enough to try.
One important step toward peace is dialogue, not just between governments, but between people. Young people in Iran, Israel, and around the world are more connected than ever through social media, travel, and education. Many of them don't want war. They want opportunity, education, and freedom. If this generation grows up with open minds and open hearts, they may be the key to breaking the cycle of hatred and mistrust. And this is why education and awareness matter so much. The more we understand each other, the harder it is to hate.
Another step is international diplomacy. The world needs bold leaders who are willing to talk, to listen, and to take risks for peace. Agreements like the Iran nuclear deal were not perfect, but they were steps in the right direction. More deals, more regional cooperation, more cultural exchange. These are the real tools of peace, not missiles and tanks. America, with its global influence, can choose to be a builder of peace or a partner in war. That choice will shape the future of not just Iran and Israel, but the entire world.
So what can you, our dear listeners, do? You may not be a president or a diplomat, but your voice still matters. You can stay informed, ask questions, and speak out for peace in your own communities. You can use your social media not to spread hate or fear, but to share stories of hope, facts, and understanding. And if you are learning English with us, you now have the power to talk about global issues like this one, with confidence and intelligence. That is a powerful skill in our modern world.
Before we close this episode, let us ask you some final questions. These questions are not just for conversation, they are for reflection. Do you think America will continue to support Israel no matter what? Or could its policy change in the future? Do you believe Iran would ever sit at the same table as Israel to negotiate peace? What role should the United Nations and global citizens like you play in creating a peaceful Middle East? And finally, do you believe peace is possible, or is conflict a permanent part of human nature?
We would truly love to hear your answers. Please write them in the comments below. And remember, this is a learning space, so don't worry if your English isn't perfect. Practice makes progress. Share your thoughts in English, and you'll grow as both a thinker and a speaker. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, The English Globe, for more deep, powerful, and thoughtful episodes like this one.
From all of us here at The English Globe, thank you for joining us today. We hope this episode helped you understand the Iran-Israel conflict better, the complex role America plays, and why global peace requires more than just politics. It requires understanding, courage, and the will to see the humanity in others. Until next time, keep learning, keep thinking, and keep believing that change is possible.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.